A new study suggests that miniature pieces of Neolithic art found in Denmark may have been offerings to bring back the sun after a catastrophic volcanic eruption blocked it out. Found during excavations at causewayed enclosures, these tiny engraved plaques known as sunstones are unusual artifacts for that time period in northwestern Europe. Since their discovery, they've been somewhat of a mystery since it's not clear why they were deposited in such large numbers. Let's take a look at the latest research on them published in the journal Antiquity. Engraved plaques dating to between the 4th and 3rd millennia BCE are common finds in Iberia. However, in northwestern Europe, up until the discovery of the sunstones, which were unearthed in small numbers, first in the 1990s and then in much larger numbers between 2013 and 2018, the only examples of engraved stone plaques that had been found were several from Orkney and a few from southern England. Referred to as sunstones due to the rayed images engraved on them, the plaques were found in the ditches of 2 causewayed enclosures at Vassagard and Rispepbjerg on the island of Bornholm. Only 20 stones were found at Rispepbjerg, so the paper focuses on the hundreds that were discovered during excavations at Vassagard. Vassagard has 2 causewayed enclosures dating to the late 4th millennium BCE, referred to as Vassagard East and West. They have opposite orientations and are made up of double-ditch circuits. Excavations have revealed finds that attribute both enclosures to the funnel beaker culture in the early Neolithic, around 3400 BCE. Evidence that the ditches were recut supports a long period of use for both enclosures of around 500 years. The ditches were then filled in and timber palisades were built around the entire site. At that time, small timber circles were also constructed. Between 2013 and 2018, 614 engraved stone plaques were found at Vassagard West. The majority were excavated from the ditches, but some also came from post holes where the small timber circles had been, and some came from a cultural layer next to the enclosure. The stratigraphy of the ditches shows that the lower layers were sealed by a stone pavement between 3000 and 2900 BCE. The majority of the engraved plaques were found on top of this pavement in a layer of infill dating to between 2900 and 2800 BCE. Post holes belonging to a circular timber structure were also excavated and found to contain pottery, charcoal, engraved stones, and a decorated piece of daub with a similar motif to the plaques. It's thought this circular structure was a cult building and that a stone in its center resting on crushed granite functioned as an altar. After the building had been in use for a short period, it was then destroyed and the empty post holes were filled with objects. 8 of these circular structures have been found at Vassagard and 24 have been found at Rispepbjerg. The pottery in these post holes dates the time of the deposits to the Vassagard phase of the funnel beaker culture around 2900 BCE. Charcoal from the post holes was also radiocarbon tested and corroborated this date. Some of the plaques are made of black shale from the local Upper Ordovician bedrock, and some are made of softer shale types. Thin pieces of quartz worked into circular shapes but not decorated in any way were also excavated from Vassagard. The team of researchers categorized the stone plaques based on their motifs. This was not possible for all of them since they are mostly small fragments measuring less than a centimeter rather than complete plaques. Those not classified were left as a residual group. 388 plaques and plaque fragments were categorized into 6 types according to their motifs. Interestingly, some plaques had been carefully engraved with a lot of skill, whereas others had been carved more roughly. Out of the plaques that had preserved rims, 40% were found to have an ornamental edge. Type 1 classifies 131 plaques with sun motifs. They have incised lines which look like the sun's rays emanating from a circle in the center, as well as concentric circles. These have been separated into 4 subtypes depending on the way the rays are engraved. Type 2 classifies 74 plaques with bands, which are separated further into two subtypes. These bands look like rays, but rather than emanating from a central circle, they run in parallel to one another. Type 3 classifies 102 plaques with lines and groups of lines, creating 4 subtypes of geometric motif. Type 4 classifies 38 plaques with plant motifs. Type 5 classifies 38 plaques that are rounded and undecorated, and Type 6 classifies 6 plaques with unique motifs. Plant and sun motifs make sense when you consider that this was a Neolithic society who relied on the sun for agricultural success. However, it's notable that there's practically no figurative imagery in the Neolithic archaeological record of northwestern Europe. Clay discs found in Vassagard East are also engraved with sun motifs. The distribution of engraved plaques in Vassagard West suggests that they were deposited in one single event or on just a few occasions. Analyses of the stones also show that they were in use for a long period of time before being deposited. There's evidence that they were carried long enough to become polished or worn down, and some have burn marks. Many of them appear to have been carved in phases too. It appears that the plaques played a role in the closing of the causewayed enclosure, since the ditches were not recut after their deposition. Interestingly, this was also accompanied by the funnel beaker culture's transition to the Vassagard phase, which archaeologists have long known to have taken place around 2900 BCE. At the same time, timber palisades were built around the causewayed enclosures. But what could have led to this transformation of the site? Since the deposition was on a large scale and restricted to either one or several events, it's likely that it was a response to a major incident. The sun and plant imagery imply this was related to a natural disaster or climatic event that negatively affected agriculture or the visibility of the sun. There were no major solar eclipses on Bornholm between 3000 and 2000 BCE. However, a severe cooling event did occur in northwestern Europe before and after 2900 BCE. This has been determined from annual sedimentation layers in lakes and the annual growth of tree rings in subfossil wood at sites in Germany. Evidence from other locations indicates that several cooling events around that time affected the wider northern hemisphere. A comparison was made between the tree rings that show frost events and the GISP2 Greenlandic ice core for that time period, and it was found that the core contains sulfate, a signal of volcanic eruptions. When a volcano erupts, it injects sulfate aerosols into the stratosphere, which increase the haze that reflects solar radiation back into space, leading to cooling. A major volcanic eruption has been determined in the past from Greenlandic ice cores for the year 2931 BCE plus or minus 11 years, and from Antarctic ice cores for the year 2910 BCE plus or minus 19 years. This eruption is ranked in a list of the most powerful eruptions of the Holocene as number 15. So it's likely that this eruption led to a cooling event with drastic consequences for the Neolithic inhabitants of Bornholm, and may have triggered the deposition of the engraved plaques, as well as the social and economic changes that archaeologists have labelled as the final phase of the funnel beaker culture. The deposition appears to reflect a community effort to bring back the sun and restore the harvest. At that time, the last phase of the funnel beaker culture saw them stop building megalithic tombs, and also saw population decline and plague in southern Scandinavia. The construction of the palisade enclosures may have been for defence as a result of conflict due to competition for resources prompted by the cooling event. It's also possible that the effects of the cooling event lasted a long time and ushered in the era of the corded ware societies that migrated from the steppe and spread across Europe. I'm curious to know if any other interesting activities dating to 2900 BCE have been identified at other Neolithic sites across Europe. If such an eruption was the cause of cooling across the northern hemisphere, then it's likely that similar Neolithic Neolithic agricultural societies in Europe would have been affected in the same way. That doesn't mean they all engraved sun and plant motifs onto small stones, but there may have been localized reactions to the event that stand out in the archaeological record. There's no suggestion of which volcano this eruption belonged to, but there are multiple pieces of evidence that point towards it having taken place at that time. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's it. Please hit the like button if you didn't already, because we have our own algorithm deity to appease. Thank you to my patrons and channel members. Your support means a lot, and I'll see you next time.